Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old, and today it's time for another top 10 list. Right, this was not the most popular of my discography reviews. I have a feeling more people are just kind of waiting for me to get to the next discography review and move on. I'm worried this particular video isn't going to do well views-wise. The regular videos have been averaging like 500 views each, which is more than I honestly expected, but whatever. But yeah, I end every discography review with a top 10 list, and this one's not going to be any exception. I mean, I believe 808 State to fully deserve a video like this. They're a huge part of the history of electronic music that often get overlooked, and a huge part of my life as well. Not only were 808 State one of the first bands I discovered purely on my own time all the way back in my middle school days, they've held up excellently well to this day. I believe out of the 6 albums they have, not a single one was subpar or even sub-great. They have one of my now 4 10 out of 10 albums with Don Solaris on top of that. They are absolutely worth people's time, and I'm gonna count down my favorite tracks theirs. So, of course, let's get the disclaimers out of the way. It's all my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it. Everything is ranked purely on my own personal enjoyment and nostalgia, and that's it. And also, the ranking only reflects how I feel at this current moment, subject to change in the future, especially true of this particular list. As my top 5, my entire top 5 shifted around a lot, and it was particularly difficult to pin my ranking down. Any of those 5 could be my number 1 at any moment, but this is what I happen to be vibing with the most right now. So, without any further ado, let's get right into the top 10 best 808 State songs. Number 10. Southern Cross from Gorgeous. Okay, so we're starting this list off with a bit of an obscure pick. Now, Southern Cross is a uniquely spacey sort of track, with lots of light, sparkling synth lines going up against some very nice and warm choirs, though also paired up with a particularly fat bass line and some pretty intense and driving moments too. It's pretty low on the list, given how I'm starting to figure out it's not quite as good out of context from the Gorgeous album, which had such a large variety of different sounds and moods to help prop it up. But I do always really enjoy when these guys go for something more atmospheric. Definitely a longtime favorite. Number 9. Black D'Artagnan. D'Artagnan? From Don Solaris. Speaking of the atmospheric side of 808 State, a track like this really exemplifies why I love Don Solaris in particular, because it's a weird track, but not weird in the usual way 808 State tracks are weird. Instead of, like, shoving hooks together at random as they did in their earlier work, they put a lot of effort into crafting atmosphere with a very warm and sunny but laid-back vibe with exotic instrumentation and awesome horn accompaniment, creating a vibe that always felt to me like going on a train ride through the desert. Stuff like this that I can really get myself immersed in to this extent is a rarity with these guys, so I gotta give it special accolades for that. Number 8. Playnine from Gorgeous. This track has a similar appeal to Black D'Artagnan and Southern Cross, as it's among their more relaxing material. Don't worry, I didn't make this entire list of their down-tempo material. Now, I think the previous track did a better job of pure, atmospheric construction and just from a pure production standpoint, but I place this one higher because it's so much more of an 808 State track. Among the soothing guitar plucking and sparkling synth pads are some foot-tapping break beats, some noisier and darker sidetracks out of nowhere that, while really not matching the rest of the track's atmosphere, they seem to integrate themselves perfectly into the track. Maybe it's just from my hundreds of repeat listens over many years, but this is a track that can make me marvel at the beauty of the world, but also happens to be presented in a random way that only 808 State would do. So, awesome track. Number 7. Cotija from 90. speaking of tracks that only 808 State would do, here's a track which is basically the most 808 State thing in existence. The way the various samples are manipulated and shoved together ad nauseum, making for a silly and random experience that somehow loses none of its charm or catchiness at any point. And the way it seems to gush 90s out of every fiber of its entire being, despite having been released before the 90s actually started. To be real, more than half of the 90 album delivers on this exact same appeal with basically just as much success. I mean, this is the kind of thing that only 808 State does. But Cotija makes the list over tracks like Cobra Bora and Donkey Doctor because it's easily the catchiest of the more random tracks from that album. You wouldn't think a track so non-linear and odd would stick with you so much, but it most certainly does. Number 6. Lift from XL. Next up on the list is another similarly random track along the same Cotija lines, but a little bit of a step up in nearly every way. More random, but yet smoother, catchy, and memorable from start to finish, despite lots of weird sidetracks. Heck, it's even slightly less dated than Cotija as well. By that I mean it's only very 90s instead of extremely 90s. But yeah, more importantly, what Lift has over Cotija, for me, is just pure nostalgia. It was one of the first tracks I ever heard from these guys, and it was an early favorite that started to help develop my personal tastes in electronic music. From the smooth waiting room melodies of the intro to the weird and creepy stuff that happens through the middle, yet again, just seems to gel well together somehow because it's 808 State. I don't know, I just love every moment of this track. Number 5. Jerusalem from Don Solaris. This is another track that goes way back with me. I distinctly remember going through 808 State's catalog as a little kid, finding this track alongside a number of other ones from their various other albums, and no other track, I think at that particular time, was I this quickly into. Just the bright and cheerful vibe, the wide and satisfying sound palette, it was so easy for me to get into as a kid, and I felt like I could even get my parents into them or something. That didn't really come to pass, but oh well. While I've now come to accept that Banachek is probably a ballsier and more interesting ending to Don Solaris than this, I perceive this to basically be the album's ending for a while, and it's because it's such a cathartic and happy track that just instantly puts me in a good mood, like very few other tracks do. Just kinda your whole happily ever after moment, and until everything goes to shit in the next track. Heck, it could be my number 1 pick depending on my mood, but I did find 4 other ones that I'm currently feeling more at the moment. Number 4. Azura from Don Solaris.
Here's all
So on the exact opposite side of the coin from Jerusalem, if you were getting sick of me constantly picking from the mellower side of 808 State's catalog, here's a track I love for its sheer badassery. Is that even a word? It's dark, it's noisy, it's experimental, but it doesn't sacrifice any melody or atmosphere or emotion. The crazy drum and bass moments paired up with the dramatic wall of synth pads and earwormy steel drum melodies. Do 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 do. As well as the less than comprehensible vocals of Louise Rhodes, which add a layer of emotion over it. It's in a very similar way that Alison Goldfrapp did on Orbital tracks like Nothing Left and Are We Here. I know it's not necessarily their most well-loved track, but I do personally find this track to be absolutely incredible. Number 3. In Your Face from XL. Right, I think this is among the most obvious picks for this list. This isn't a track I have all that much to say about particularly, besides that it is one of the single most hard-hitting 808 State tracks. Maybe tracks like Cubic are louder and more intense, but this one is more fun and catchier on top of that. Beat is more satisfying, the whole out-of-nowhere sidetrack with that news anchor or whoever at the beginning. and every other weird offbeat twist and turn that the track continues to take, it has no qualms with whatever it's doing, and I'm not afraid to get in people's faces about how much I love this one. Number 2. 10 times 10 from Gorgeous. This is one of those tracks that I cannot type about and listen to at the same time, because I just get into it so much. My entire body is moving around so much that it's hard to even get my hands in the right position. This track is exceptionally silly and oozing 90s cheese everywhere, but every melody is super catchy, the gospel singers pump me up so much, the bass drop is incredible despite being in the wrong key. It's a track that is so unabashedly crazy and random and makes absolutely zero qualms about it. It doesn't care, and you don't care either. You're just dancing along to the beat. Again, serious contender for number 1, but it just barely missed the cut by one other track that I felt was a little more deserving of the honors. But before I get into that number 1, here's some honorable mentions. Narcossa from New Build. 606 from Outpost Transmission. Oops from XL. Oops. Alright. Sunrise from 90. Cubic from XL. Bent from Outpost Transmission. Bond from Don Solaris. Technobell from XL. Yeah, that rhymed. Sink/Swim from New Build. Lung Fu from Outpost Transmission. Black Morpheus from Gorgeous. Quincy's Lunch from Outpost Transmission. Moose from Don Solaris. Cobra Bora from 90. Flow Coma from New Build. Right, I think that's enough. Already several more than I usually do for these kinds of lists. But, alright, let's get right into number 1. Pacific 202 from 90. Yep, surprise. Probably the single most obvious number 1 pick I could have gone with, being their most recognizable single by far, but it deserves every bit of love it's gotten over the years. It's a seamless mix of everything I love about 808 State, from the down-tempo and atmospheric stuff I mentioned in the bottom half of this list, to the more hard-hitting and danceable stuff that made it higher up, from the random and offbeat nature of your average early 808 State tracks to the more focused stuff you'd find on some later albums of theirs. Everything I love about 808 State just seems to come together in this one track, absolutely perfectly. I love this track so much that when I was in 7th grade, I made my own tribute track to it of sorts called Pacific West. Yes, an American 7th grader in 2009 making 808 State tributes in GarageBand. I was a weird kid. But I don't care. Fact remains is that Pacific 202 is an absolute classic in all of dance and electronic music, and it will remain a part of me for the rest of my life. But yeah, that's the list. Next discography review, I'm thinking of doing this guy. But we'll see what happens next. Of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so you leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.